Today's episode was recorded live at Toronto's Royal Conservatory of Music on October 31st, 2025. You can watch the video versions of this and past conversations at our website, singforscience.org. Please be sure to check out our other episodes, including one with Questlove on the topic of developmental psychology. Don't forget to click subscribe, and please rate the show on your favorite podcast platform.
And so if you induce a sense of compassion, gratitude in people, they show increased willingness to engage in all sorts of helpful, volunteer, caring behaviors. So yeah, there are ways that we induce emotions, like bringing people into the field, and then ways that we can try and measure what we're interested in, whether it's cooperation or helping, that are also very creative and different in the lab.
I'm going to sing it again. And I'll see if I can get every single person in the whole place to sing, and maybe even the chairs will sing with us. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. 'Cause your friends are my friends, my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt White. Each week, we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Today, we'll be speaking with beloved children's entertainer and advocate, Raffi. Some of Raffi's most memorable and iconic songs offer a map for the development of what psychologists often define as self-transcendent emotions like compassion, gratitude, and awe. For decades, songs like The More We Get Together, Thanks a Lot, and Bananaphone have helped generations of children experience joy and connection with one another and the world around them. Also joining us is University of Toronto psychologist and altruism researcher, Dr. Jennifer Steller. Dr. Steller directs the Health, Emotions, and Altruism Lab, the HEAL Lab, where she studies how pro-social emotions develop and transform human behavior. Her recent work, fittingly titled Compassion, Gratitude, and Awe, explores what connects these three complex and difficult to classify emotions. Her research helps reveal how these feelings, the very ones Raffi's music leads us toward, shape our capacity for empathy, belonging, and moral connection. The title of today's episode on the podcast is The More We Get Together, The Psychology of Self-Transcendent Emotions. Toronto, please help me give a warm welcome to Raffi and Dr. Jennifer Steller. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello.
I think the first thing that I want to ask you, Raffi, is about these three songs as a collection. Now, for my show's purposes, I have grouped them together because I think they very elegantly map onto Jennifer's work and offer a window into what she does. But I'm wondering if for you, you could identify a through line that connects them in any way.
Yeah, your kids are 5 and 8 years old. They're the through line, right? But let me just say I'm delighted to be here. Interesting opportunity to share some thoughts about music for young children, and specifically a few of my songs to refer to. The More We Get Together has been around for a long, long time. It's a traditional song that I think comes to us from Europe. And I'm told that it's basically an papa song. Da 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 papa papa papa. You can, hear a town band in a band shell playing it, right, with tubas and such, right? But I also understand about that song that it's been translated into many, many languages, and it never loses the key meaning, which is all about the joy of togetherness, which is kind of interesting. And I'll talk more about that song in a minute, but if you're talking about the other two in the same breath and how they connect. Well, Thanks a Lot is a song I wrote in 1979 for my 1980 album Baby Beluga. And it's a song that still moves me when I rehearse it at home, as I need to do often for the concerts that I'm giving. It's in every concert that I sing. So I'm glad that it has some longevity. And then Bananaphone, a phone with appeal. That whimsical song, I don't quite know what gave rise to it in my mind one day back in 1993. I like to say the Bananaphone predated the iPhone by many, many years. And as an imaginary device, I wish we had a banana here, actually.
Can arrange
I'd be
that.
calling my friends on it. As an imaginary device, it's pretty potent. And I have fans tell me that every time they're in the grocery store and they go by the banana section, their kids break out into song. So,
Oh, look at that.
look, a banana.
The cat brought a banana. Yes, we have bananas. Thank you, cat.
Now you can have your phone and eat it too.
Yeah.
Where was I?
I'll tell you something that I found remarkable is that within these three songs, there's something that points to the other. So, for example, in Bananaphone, I think you say, it's so appealing. I've got this feeling that we can get together and sing.
And sing, yes. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Oh, there's a monkey.
Photo moment.
Yeah. So I would imagine, at the risk of using a baseball analogy at a very tender moment, I will say, I feel like I'm throwing you a little bit of a softball, but as an altruism researcher, getting to talk about Raffi's music, where do you even begin?
Yes, it's a little bit of a softball, but I love it. We could start that way. So whenever we are living our lives, going about our days, there's always this balance between ourselves and others. And I think, to me, this work really emphasizes that connection to other people and valuing them and caring about their well-being in addition to our own. And it's quite easy to care about your own well-being. It's much harder to care about other people. It's even harder to care about groups or abstract concepts like humanity, country. And so, to me, these songs try to instill some of those values, encourage that balance towards caring about others, which I think maybe we all need a little bit more today, more than ever. And that's really at the heart of what it means to be pro-social and cooperative and altruistic. So I think there's a lot of lovely connections. We can talk about the emotions as well, because emotions encourage our behavior. They compel us towards action. And I think emotions like gratitude, compassion, even awe, which some of you may be less familiar with, but that feeling you get when you see something vast and grand that defies explanation, these emotions bind us together. And I think they are a through line in your work, and I hope a through line in humanity that connects us to each other.
And reading your work, you provide a really comprehensive history, and that one chapter in particular that I referred to. And, so two things. One is that often philosophers, or hundreds of years ago, philosophers classified these as virtues. And even today, there's still some debate, or quite a bit of debate, as to whether or not these are actually discrete emotions to begin with, yes?
Yes.
So why do you think they're emotions and not virtues?
Interesting question. First of all, I love these emotions because they're weird, because they're complex. We all can kind of wrap our minds around fear and sadness and even joy, but these ones, they're deeply social. They're important for our relationships, our interactions with other people, and they're really complex. They involve cognitive components like being motivated to care about someone else's suffering and reduce that suffering, which is what happens with compassion. And actually, for a while, I think emotions were really looked down upon. So there's this sort of interesting contradiction between seeing virtues like being grateful and compassionate And also in the same breath, arguing that emotions and passions drive us away from the best version of ourselves. So I think that's been this weird inherent tension in these emotions. But to me, I find the emotional component of them almost more interesting, because I think when you think about why you do things, you can always come up with a logical reason. But in reality, what we find in psychology is a lot of our behaviors, our actions are actually driven by our emotional responses. You see somebody on the street that might need money, and it's that compassion that pushes you to walk over, maybe have a conversation with them, give them a little bit of something. And I think in that sense, they could be virtues, they could be emotions, but understanding them as emotions will offer us a bit more insight into how they can encourage the kind of behaviors we might want to see in a society, the virtues that we might want to uphold, and even beyond things like gratitude. We can think about creativity, humility, those curiosity even. Those are really founded in, I think, emotions like awe. So I think you could think of them either way, but I find it more interesting to play and investigate them as emotions.
Raffi, when you wrote Thanks a Lot, I know a little bit about the background of that song. Do you remember experiencing gratitude as kind of an upwelling of feeling that inspired you to write that song?
Well, you might be surprised to know that I had a headache when I wrote that song. And, I wanted to lose my headache, right? So I took a pain reliever, sat down quietly, took my guitar, and kind of was strumming it very quietly. And then a little finger-picking pattern kind of arose. And those of you who know the song Thanks a Lot know that it doesn't move around very much from chord to chord. In fact, it just stays in the one. And the beginning chord, it's kind of a meditative piece. And so I think writing it kind of made me feel good and peaceful. And I think I took note of the gratitude that momentary comfort was giving me as my headache subsided, And I'm thrilled that song has had such longevity. And when Baby Beluga, the album, came out, I couldn't tell that people would love the original songs that I put into that album as much as any of the traditional ones. And that just gave me such a feeling that I was on the right track with this music from an early time. And Thanks a Lot is in every concert that I do still. And there's a wonderful feeling of togetherness in the hall when I sing that quiet song.
And how tremendous was that this morning? We had two opportunities all to sing together, one with Renee directing us in harmony, and then also with Raffi leading
with
us.
The More We Get
More
Together.
We Get Together. And it actually kind of lines up with this, Jennifer, I'd like you to speak a little bit to this research about these pro-social emotions, and you can see the slides right up there with the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems.
Yeah, well, I find it really interesting that in a moment when you had a headache, you chose to do what many of us in psychology would call a gratitude practice, a music version of it. And there is work that suggests that positive emotions can impact not just our well-being, but also our physical health. And that's separate from negative emotions. For a long time, people thought positive emotions were just not feeling negative emotions. But I'm sure you'd all understand that, surviving and thriving are very different. And positive emotions are about thriving. And it turns out that doesn't just impact mental health, it also impacts physical health. And so one of the pathways that my lab has been interested in, others as well, has been sort of bodily changes, the autonomic physiological changes that can occur with some of these emotions. And so there's a slide up here you can see. It breaks this system that we have that controls our breathing, our heart rate, the things you're not really thinking about, right? They're just happening in the background. That these self-transcendent emotions seem to tip the balance towards what we call this parasympathetic system. It's this activation of the rest and digest system, kind of calms our body down. It prepares us to connect with other people. it's what you see when things are going well and people are doing the things that people do, interacting, playing, having a good time with each other, digesting their food. And that's in contrast to this sympathetic system, which tends to activate in fight or flight situations when you're threatened. I'm sure you all have had that experience as well. It's not particularly pleasant. And so to the extent that these two opposing systems can be, the scales can be tipped towards one side or the other, generally parasympathetic activation is better. And it does seem that these kinds of emotions that we're talking about move the scales towards this rest and digest parasympathetic activation. And they do a lot of other wonderful things for the body that I won't go into detail unless we want to talk about it more. But even just an enduring shift in that system that can come from feeling gratitude, from singing a song, joy, that can help us in the long term promote our physical health. So I think that link between physical health and positive emotions is one we need to be more thoughtful about. And it, to me, legitimizes the place of some of those emotions that you might feel like, why do I need to go out and have an awe experience? That seems like a thing I do when I have more time, right? I'm busy. But actually, if that's helping you promote better physical health, that doesn't feel quite like a luxury. It feels like something that should be built into your day. Gratitude, compassion, similar. So to me, I think it's really poignant that that's the origin of that song, given what we know about some of these emotions.
And it makes me think also when we're talking about the respiratory system and how it's linked to emotions. Raffi, I wonder, when did you start making it a practice to ask children at your concerts to take a deep breath before you started? How did that evolve?
Well, at first that was to get some quiet in the hall, It's interesting how that has evolved, actually. When I was first singing Thanks a Lot, I would ask the audience to take a deep breath in. I'd go, and gently let it out, I would say. I would model that. And then, as the murmur subsided a little bit, I'd launch into the song with a prayer and a hope that it would be okay. But over the decades, if I can put it that way, because I've been doing this for 50 years. Next year is the 50th anniversary of Singable Songs for the Very Young. Thank you. Over the decades, what's happened is that the children I once sang to in the 70s and 80s grew up, became adults, had their own kids, and I call those people beluga grads. That's a term of endearment. And they seem to love it. They say, I'm a proud beluga grad. Anyway, they're now bringing their own kids to the concert so that when it gets to Thanks a Lot, I no longer need to say, let's take a deep breath in, which would not be a bad thing to do anyway, but I don't need to use it as a way of getting the murmur down, because oddly enough, from song to song, it's quieter than it used to be. Because the beluga grads, the adults, are anchoring the energy of the kids. There's some regulation happening there, Very interesting. And so I usually just say, and now I'm going to sing a quiet song all by myself. and then I go into Thanks a Lot.
So, 50th anniversary of Singable Songs. For the music aficionados among you, here is a mind-blowing factoid. This album was produced by rock super producer Daniel Lanois.
Engineered by
You
Daniel
produced
Lanois.
it.
I produced it, yes.
See, Daniel
He was the
Lanois,
engineer.
Brian Eno, in his mother's basement, yes? A super producer,
Yeah.
as we say in the biz.
And a great musician.
Yeah. And this is a gorgeous album. And I'll say something else. I kind of had a joke among my musician friends when we talk about music that we found soothing, like bossa nova or even ambient music. I would say it's like Raffi for grown-ups. And as I become reintroduced to this music and I have this new relationship to it, I can sincerely say that Raffi is like Raffi for grown-ups.
He's a beluga grad.
I want to know, so Jennifer, your scholarship is a product of Greater Good Society of Berkeley, right? How do they teach these methodologies? How do you study compassion and gratitude and awe? Because I'd imagine it's a rigorous program at a prestigious institution like that.
It is, but at the same time, a lot of that work is happening from the ground up there. So we are trying as hard as we can to do it well, but we're kind of making it up as we go along. We're figuring out what works, what doesn't, how can we induce different emotions in the lab, how can we measure different outcomes. And so a lot of it, because it's really at the forefront of emotion research and we're working with emotions people aren't used to working with, we have to find our own path forward. So we've done all sorts of creative things. We've taken people to museums, we have taken people to nature sites. One of my friends and colleagues took people on a 4-day rafting trip in nature. So there's all sorts of interesting techniques, but we've really had to develop a lot of them on our own and make sure they meet the rigors of the scientific process so that we can make claims about what these emotions do, how they contribute to outcomes like well-being or physical health.
Tell me about the study that I find truly hilarious and kind of like a dark sense of humor among scientists is the survey experiment. You know the one I'm talking about?
No, which one? Because we do lots of surveys.
No, where you ask something about how you basically implant a feeling of compassion that make people more willing to fill out a tedious survey.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, there are lots of ways we can measure. We can ask people all sorts of questions about how compassionate they're feeling, but we do try to measure actual behaviors. And there's a lot of different ways we can do this. One could be inducing compassion, like you're talking about here, and looking at people's willingness to do something that is very boring and time-consuming on behalf of someone else. So to sort of take on the burden of a task that you really don't want to do to help someone else out. And we've probably all been in those situations. So the goal in the lab is to replicate that, or recreate that, I should say, but in a very controlled environment. And so if you induce a sense of compassion, gratitude in people, they show increased willingness to engage in all sorts of helpful, volunteer, caring behaviors, like taking on a very boring task, which can sometimes be the case for surveys that are not designed to be engaging on behalf of someone else. So yeah, there are ways that we induce emotions that I think are really interesting, like bringing people into the field, and then ways that we can try and measure what we're interested in, whether it's cooperation or helping, that are also very creative and different in the lab.
And so this is still, studying positive emotions, period, is still somewhat of a nascent field, right? And because it's always been in vogue to talk about trauma and fear. And I'd put this question to you, Raffi, because it's so rare to find an entertainer, a public figure who has such a set moral compass. And you've had that throughout your entire career. And I'd be curious to know how that got set. You came up during a very decadent, hedonistic period in the music business in the 70s and the 80s, yet you always stayed true to your values. So how did that get set?
Can't I just talk about the more we get together? Look, for a long time, I've sought to be of service. I remember I had a couple of gold albums in 1979. My first two albums had gone gold, and I had the third one, Corner Grocery Store, and I was meditating. And I was meditating with a prayerful feeling of, asking to be inspired to create something new. I felt that I'd been given so much, and my prayerful feeling was, how can I be of greater service? What can I do now to be of service? And in a way, that spirit has stayed with me throughout. My daily gratitude practice is that question. How can I be of service to the greatest good? And so the thing about the more we get together, if I can get back to that song, is there's a term economists use. It's called social capital. It basically means the good that happens when people get together. It's a fancy term, huh? Social capital. Well, one time I was in a talk that an economist in Vancouver was giving, and he noticed me in a few rows back, and he said, "Oh, and there's Raffi, who made popular the social capital theme song, The More We Get Together." I'm going, whoa. And then he cited a book by Robert Putnam, an economist called Bowling Alone that was decrying the fact that fewer and fewer people were joining bowling leagues. Now, he didn't mention that I had a song called the Bowling Song. We'll leave that one alone for a moment. But he was trying to say that in a time when people were less and less going out, in their bowling leagues and experiencing together, a song like The More We Get Together was of value, he was saying, which is kind of interesting. And in a sense, the digital era provides opportunities for connection. It's not altogether a negative experience, especially for those who live alone, So I'm just fascinated by the notion of togetherness, what contributes to that feeling, and possibly what goes the other way, what takes away from that,
When did you start meditating?
In the mid-1970s or so.
Was it just because it was kind of in the ether? Do you?
Well, I was going to yoga classes, and I still do my morning yoga. I do it with my dog now. My dog knows when I say, let's do dog yoga, she goes and gets a squeeze toy. I do the yoga postures, and she keeps me smiling, squeezing her squeeze toy. That's how I start my mornings. Dog yoga. There might be a song in that. Downward dog, yeah.
Exactly. I think a lot of what we're talking about, what I see, I think I read Dacher Keltner's book, who started the Greater Good Center at Berkeley, and talking about awe, and this concept of the default mode network keeps coming up. Can you please tell the audience about that?
Sure. So when you are just relaxing, sort of mind wandering, I guess I'll say, often what researchers find is you have a lot of self-relevant thoughts. What am I going to eat for dinner later? Should I have said that thing I said to my coworker? And this tends to be associated with this activation that they call the default mode network in the brain. So this is, you're not doing anything in particular, which is why it's called default. What is your brain just doing at this sort of resting state? And recently, researchers have started looking at what happens when you're feeling an emotion like awe, which does move some of that focus away from the self. We sometimes refer to it as a ego-quieting emotion. And it turns out that research seems to suggest that you see less of this default mode network activation. And so it might mean that what this emotion is doing is pulling us away from the self-referential processes that happen, just thinking about the self, and towards something else. Maybe it's the nature scene that someone's seeing. Maybe it's the art that they're getting absorbed into, the music. And so this might have some really interesting benefits, especially for people who might have a very loud ego. Depression is a case where people have a lot of self-ruminatory processes, thinking about what they did, what they said, how it was wrong, what they should have done differently. And so the ego-quieting nature of awe could play a role for those people more than we realized. And part of what is happening here is getting absorbed into something, but also connecting outward with something else, just to bring it back to this idea of connection. And so emotions like awe do seem to create the sense that we're part of something bigger. They also, interestingly, to go back to your earlier point, they encourage us to want to think about generations beyond our own. So what can we leave for the next generation? How can we be of service to future generations? What are the larger problems facing humanity that we could contribute to solving or helping? And I think that sort of vision for ourselves and what we leave, and for humanity as a whole, those are the kinds of things that kids are ready to hear about and people don't often talk about. But I do think they're part of your songs. What can we do to contribute to others, to contribute to society, contribute to the well-being of humanity, and not just what can we have for ourselves and how can we enjoy life ourselves? So I do think that this sense of connection is inherent in this, potentially how this default mode network works, but also these emotions of awe and connection.
And I'm curious, about kind of getting out of a rut, because if you're in this ruminatory feedback loop and you're severely depressed, the last thing you want to do is go to a museum.
And sadly, the last thing you do is
Raffi's
connect to
looking at me
others.
like, What are you talking about?
I like museums.
I love museums, but when I'm depressed, I think it's kind of hard to break free.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So how do what do the experts say about how to get out of that feedback loop to...
Yeah. It's really hard. I don't think people know yet. That's why scientists are working on this. What I think these emotions, especially awe, might do is open a little bit of a door for people to reach out, whether it's going out to a museum or out for a nature walk, which can be incredibly healing, or even connecting with others, which sadly for people who are depressed, the last thing that they feel like doing is calling up a friend. And the thing they probably need to do the most is to reach out and call a friend. So I don't think awe is necessarily going to fix everything, but if it opens the door for you to step out and engage with the world, that's a great first step. So that's where I see maybe a potential for something like awe, even gratitude, and compassion for these emotions to just kind of give us a little push out of that rut so that we feel we have the power ourselves to get the rest of the way out of it.
At what point did awe, I read in your paper that traditionally awe was seen as something kind of signifying terror, you know, kind of in the spiritual sense. At what point did that shift that we started to redefine it as something more positive?
I'll give you what I think it is, but we don't really know. So it did start as a very terrifying emotion. If you go look at the origins of awe, it's in terms like terror and dread, which I found surprising given my experiences with awe tend to be pretty positive. And today it is true that generally if you ask somebody about an awe experience, they're going to tell you about a good thing that happened. What we think might have happened is actually during the Romanticism and Transcendentalism period, awe moved away from being this emotion that was a feeling you felt towards God who could smite you at any moment, and more towards the beauty of nature. So it's taken on this association with beauty in a way that's transformed its experience. Now, I don't think this is the case around the world. There's some work, even some of my own, to suggest that it might differ a little bit in cultures, and some other cultures outside of Western European-based cultures might have a more fearful component of awe that's still a large piece of the awe experience. But at least in the West, it does seem to have latched on a bit more to beauty from art, actually, from writers and artists of that time period.
Well, awe is also, another word for it is wonderment. Really? Wonder, marveling. And the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is perfect. If you think, I wish I'd written it. How I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Pretty pure and beautiful, perfect.
In your list of gratitude affirmations, Raffi, and thanks a lot. Thanks for the wonder in me.
Thanks for the wonder in me. Yeah, important line, don't you think?
Absolutely. This is something I found really fascinating, this concept of assimilation and accommodation, because when I was thinking about what are the advantages to instilling a sense of wonderment in children, this is kind of the obvious conclusion to draw, yeah.
Yeah. When we think about what elicits awe, it can be hard to capture it in words. And Dr. Keltner, other researchers have worked really hard to figure out what are the active ingredients in this emotion. And one seems to be this sense of vastness. It could be that you're seeing something that's extremely large. For me, I remember this feeling when I saw the giant sequoias out in California. But it can also be figurative. Maybe you're in the presence of someone that you find magnanimous or powerful or impressive in some way. And then the other one, which relates to this picture you have here, and also to child psychology, bringing it back to children here, comes from Piaget. Piaget was a famous developmental psychologist, and he argued that what children do, what we all do as we develop, is we build schemas of the world. There are categories that explain where things go. So, you start by seeing a dog, and then you learn, okay, there's a category of dog, and then you see different kinds of dogs that don't really look like the first dog, but you learn to put them all in the same category. And so you build up these schemas of what a dog is. But then you might see something that either defies that schema, maybe it's exceeds what you normally would put in that category, it's so beyond your expectations, that you have to change how you think about the world, or at least that schema. And what we find with awe is that often people find that what they're seeing, it's hard to put words to what they're seeing. It doesn't fit with the category that they normally think about. So you might say, oh, I've seen some nice sunsets. But when you see that awe-inspiring sunset, it is like the most beautiful sunset. When you think about a star and how far it is and how big it is and how old it is, it really forces you to think beyond the normal categories of space and time that we inhabit as humans. And so when generating definitions for awe and thinking about vastness, the other one that was created was need for accommodation from Piaget's work. And I think as children, they do this all the time because children encounter things that don't fit in the category. They're, first time they've ever seen it. But as adults, we kind of figure out how the world works. So when we see something that doesn't fit in our schema, that really makes us stop and take a minute and say, what is going on here? Maybe it's extremely beautiful or powerful or even scary. And it really challenges us to rethink what we know and what we don't know and engenders that sense of wonder. Sometimes it can be curiosity even and humility about the world. So I think this idea of awe sort of challenging us to see the world differently is really at the heart of what leads to these things we care about, like wonder and curiosity and humility.
Experimentally, how would you incorporate the Bananaphone into an awe laboratory?
That is a very good question. I will use this in my next study because I'm always in need of good props. Well, I think one of the elements of Bananaphone that I really enjoy is the imaginative nature of it. There's all these like playful words. There's these unexpected twists where you this is how you normally think about something, but then you kind of flip it and you use it in a different way. And I think even just having participants listening to these kinds of songs could do something like boost creativity and curiosity about seeing an object in a new way. Or I would love to give children or adults something they'd never seen before, an object that, they don't know how to use it, and see, are they interested in figuring out how to use it? Are they going to play around with it? Are they going to find creative new uses for this object? And I have a feeling that putting people in these states, you kind of moving them out of the threat state, moving them into these playful, awe, curious states would lead to some really interesting behaviors. So maybe we can collaborate on my next study.
Well, I find it fascinating that the banana is still...
Would you like it?
I mean, it's interesting because when I wrote the song, this is mimicking the handset of a corded telephone, right? That the song has outlived that and continues to delight is a marvel for me. And there's a line of, don't need quarters, don't need dimes to call a friend of mine. That's a telephone booth experience. And we don't have that anymore. Nobody cares. They just like the song. Whew, And then I made fun of, the line cellular, that's a pun, of course, cellular phone, get it? Cellular. Cellular, modular, interactive modular. I'm just having a field day with humor there. But it's an odd little song. I think its main, I was going to say appeal, its main use
Well done.
is that it really does appeal to the sense of play in a young child. That's what that's its value, is we're playing. You're in the grocery store and there's a Bananaphone, and the child is a playful being, so no wonder that the song's value continues.
And the one thing that I read in your paper is about the importance of cognitive flexibility, which really makes it kind of easy to group under the umbrella of pro-social emotions, and I see the evolutionary advantage. Is that right?
I think so. And just to add to what you're saying, kids seem really good at this. They seem really good at playing, at putting weird combinations together. My daughter mixed ketchup with her milk, and I was like, go ahead, try it. But as an adult, I would never do that. That seems crazy. But I appreciated that she wanted to try it for herself. And I do think that one of the things I would love to see is us hold on to that a little bit more as adults. And maybe engaging with these songs can do that through creating a little bit of flexibility, also creating this sense of joyfulness and playfulness that I don't know if we see enough in adults. And I think it could lead to things that adults value, like being more creative, taking a perspective that's a bit outside of the box. So I don't think it's entirely fun for fun's sake. I think there could be other consequences that would be really valuable.
Although fun for fun's sake
Is also
a
amazing.
wonderful thing, because it increases the feeling of joy within us. I think we can talk about joy as a self-transcendent state as well, because although you might think, oh, it's personal, individual, no, I mean, it's contagious. And I'm all for touching that joyful feeling in every day of our lives, not to leave it for some other time. No, I want to feel the joy of being alive this day. Today. Tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow's another today. Yeah, we'll do it again. It's a good orientation.
And making space for that joy, I think, is really easy for kids sometimes and hard for adults. So I think that's an important practice that's built into some of these emotions. Make that time.
As the zeitgeist has come to include a lot of talk of reparenting, have many Beluga grads or otherwise, Raffi, come to you and talk about how your music has transformed their life experience as adults? Not just my 9-month-old is your biggest fan, but listening to The More We Get Together or Thanks a Lot has had a transformative effect on my life as an adult.
That's a good question. It's hard to answer it in a way, because what I'm hearing most from the Beluga grad parents who write to me with great love is that they're carrying something from their childhoods that has relevance for them today as they re-experience the joy of my music with their children. Now, I can't really put words to that more than what I've said. It's just, for me, it gives me a feeling of awe that this music should be able to serve in this way. I'm just floored, actually, just so grateful.
Can I add to that a little bit? As a parent of a 3- and 5-year-old myself, I think many people forget that the parents are also listening to these songs that the kids are listening to. And so my experience has been that there's a lot of kids material out there that is very painful for parents to listen to. It is just not pleasant. It is not challenging. It is very repetitive, but not in a good way. And so I also wonder if to some degree, I'm making dinner, my kids are listening to this music, but I'm listening to it too. And these messages are getting to me in addition to my kids. And so I think there's some value in that audience, which I know they're not necessarily intended for the adults as the target audience, but they are in our lives too. And hearing these things about being thankful, having these songs that are playful and surprise you, I think it seeps into us while we're doing the other things that we need to do, and our kids are actively listening to these songs. So to me, there is this like hidden second audience, even if it's not a song that I've heard before, but hearing it for the first time, there's a message that's getting to me too.
That's certainly been my experience. We've got time for a couple questions from the audience. Raffi, what's your favorite song? You've toured singing to children everywhere. Are there any moments or experiences that stand out for you?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because hearing thousands of voices call out, "Baby Beluga," is very moving still. It's a beautiful feeling. At the same time, because I'm still making music, I get excited about my latest musical release. I just released a single last week. It's called ABC Democracy. And it's a joyful, uplifting song about democracy, which is what we need more of. We need to reinvigorate our civic studies in schools. So my Raffi Foundation for Child Honoring, which you can visit at raffifoundation.org, there you will not only see a video of ABC Democracy, but there's also a study guide called Inspiring Democracy. It's for kids grade 3 and up. And I just had to mention that song because I feel like a new papa every time I have a new song out.
Could you be persuaded to sing the first two lines of it?
ABC democracy, young and old, standing free, choosing well, you and me. ABC democracy. That's the first verse.
Jennifer, isn't putting on a favorite up-tempo song a great way to transition someone from depression into taking action to call a friend or go to a museum?
I think music certainly can be. It changes mood. It can evoke some of these emotions. I'm sure everybody has a song that makes them feel awe, and it does it every time, which I find interesting because people talk about how, you know, you hear something or see something enough times, you habituate. But with awe, seems like not so much. And so I think that's a good start. I think it's always good when it's paired with something else, right? You want to move the emotions and the cognition, together. But I think sometimes we forget about the emotions. We go straight to the cognition. How can you rethink this? What could you do? Can you make a plan to call this person? And those are great. But I think emotions, whether it's through music or art or movies, they can help give a bit of fire to that energy, that cognition to go out and make a change. So yeah, I think that sounds like a wonderful place to start.
Okay, one more question. Raffi is a grandparent of a toddler, neither of whose parents are Beluga grads, and whose parents are not too musical. How might I help them?
Well, the music lives on. It's just, it's an ever-available portal into joy and togetherness and social and emotional learning. So have fun. Choose the songs that you like yourself to play with your kids. Or just, I have 3 concert videos I might mention. Often parents and grandparents like the fact that they can sit their child in front of a Raffi video for 45 minutes and then attend to the ironing or whatever it needs doing, So I say have fun, have a ball.
Folks, please help me give it up for Jennifer Stellar and Raffi. Check out and share Raffi's new song, ABC Democracy, by visiting his YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Raffi. For more information, please visit his website, raffinews.com, and you can follow him on Instagram @Raffi_music. You can learn more about Jennifer's work by visiting her website, jenniferstellar.com. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram. Social media manager and video editor is Bailey Constas. Location recording was provided by TDS Multimedia, and our digital producer is Keenan Cush. Special thanks to Kim Layton, Alex Brose, Carrie Campbell, and everyone at the Royal Conservatory of Music for making today's episode possible. If you like Sing for Science, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about the show, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, please visit singforscience.org and follow us on social media @SingForScience. Thanks for listening.